For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. If you would like to support the channel and become part of our ancient history fan community, visit patreon.com/World of Antiquity. If our civilization was suddenly destroyed in a global catastrophe, how much of it would be left in 10 or 20,000 years? Would archaeologists of that time be able to find anything of it beyond maybe some stone monuments? According to some, the answer is no. There wouldn't be much of anything left. One of those who holds this view and who has popularized it is Randall Carlson. Maybe you've caught him on the Joe Rogan podcast at some point. We're going to examine his claims on the subject and look deeper into the question of artifact durability to see whether his assertions are in harmony with scientific evidence or just a weak rationalization for why so little archaeological evidence for a lost advanced civilization has been found. In my video on ancient advanced machining, I suggested that in the distant future, there would be quite a bit of material evidence left over that would indicate to archaeologists that our civilization did in fact exist. I received quite a few comments denying my assertion. No, in just a few thousand years, there would be absolutely zero evidence of our existence. Let's start using wood and metal and plastics do not last more than a couple thousand years. Only stone would remain. Especially precious metals and tools that would have been taken and reused and melted down by others. Stone is one of the only things that could withstand the test of time, and thus, along with gold, would be the only possible evidence you could hope to uncover of such an old civilization, especially if it ended in a global cataclysm, which buried everything under a tsunami of mud. And as far as computer parts and cars and such, they wouldn't last 1,000 years. There would be nothing left. After 1,000 years, there won't be any sign of us except the pyramids and other megalithic stuff. Today, what things are still around made in 1000 CE? 1,000 years after some global cataclysm, the surviving population will have picked out all the copper, metals, or things valuable to survival. Our technology, such as computer tools and so on, would be well returned to the earth in 1,000 years. There would be no trace. Look at old cars that have been sitting for 50 years, nearly gone, and that's nowhere near 1,000 years. All those examples you gave would dissolve into the earth over 10,000 years. LOL. He uses stone examples because, given a vast amount of time passing, all that's left is stone. Dude, every single piece of modern garbage you brought up will be either entirely disintegrated or at the least totally unrecognizable, down even on a molecular level after 10,000 years. Even plastic, which we'd simply register today as tiny hydrocarbon particles. I was initially surprised that so many people took issue with me on this point, until it became apparent to me that they had been indoctrinated by others. And one of the more prominent of these others is Randall Carlson, a researcher of catastrophes who describes himself as a master builder and architectural designer, teacher, geometrician, geomythologist, geological explorer, and renegade scholar. We're going to look at some claims Carlson made on episode number 505 of the Joe Rogan podcast on the subject of artifact durability to see how well his claims hold up to scrutiny. As the clip begins, Carlson is addressing the issue of why the material record contains so little evidence for a technologically advanced civilization from 12,000 years ago.
What we see is that there's basically no record to speak of what people were doing culturally. And that has led a lot of scientists to assume that for all those tens of thousands of years and hundreds of generations, that people were essentially living nothing more than a subsistence, kind of hunter-gatherer existence, right?
No record to speak of? Ask any archaeologist of the Stone Age, and they will tell you that there most certainly is a record to speak of, and this record is full of information. Carlson seems to be turning a blind eye to what the record has in it, because it's inconvenient to him. And let's be clear here, the record that we have testifies to the existence of hunter-gatherers through the Paleolithic and Mesolithic periods. And we should also note that it is entirely possible for hunter-gatherers to live above subsistence. We have in the material record at Natufian sites, for example, evidence for food storage at a time before agriculture was practiced. Carlson may feel like hunting and gathering is nothing to speak of, but that's not what archaeologists think. It served people's interests then, and in some ways was superior to the agricultural and urban lifestyles humans lived later. Hunter-gatherers could also produce monuments. I need only point to sites like Göbekli Tepe to demonstrate that.
But what they haven't taken into account is the extremity of some of the global changes that have occurred in the interval that we humans have been here.
FYI, he's talking about a series of worldwide catastrophes which he believes destroyed advanced civilizations of the distant past. These would be urban societies with complex governmental systems, complex forms of communication, high populations, mass food production, monumental architecture, significant division of labor, and technology that is much higher than what is found in the archaeological record for those times. In fact, none of that stuff is found in the material record 12,000 years ago. But just like a kid who doesn't have his homework, he has an excuse for that. The Earth ate it.
Because what you'll hopefully begin to appreciate is that were some of these events of the scale and magnitude that have happened probably a dozen or more times in the 150 or 200,000 years that we've been here, were those events to occur today, 10,000 years from now, archaeologists would be sifting through the rubble looking for any kind of evidence that we had ever been here.
So this is the argument we're going to look into today. According to Carlson, just as the remains of our own society would be extremely difficult to find in the archaeological record 10,000 years from now, assuming we abandoned it today, so too, the remains of an advanced civilization before catastrophe more than 10,000 years ago would be extremely difficult to find in the archaeological record now. This is his explanation for why archaeologists haven't been able to locate it. Assuming this were true, that next to nothing would be left, how then would we today be able to demonstrate the existence of this lost civilization? What is the reason that people believe in it? It's one thing to say that it could be true, but it's quite another to say that we have good reason to believe it.
Yeah, metal does not last long when exposed to the elements.
The key expression here is exposed to the elements. It is most certainly true, as I'm sure you could guess, that the environment that metal is exposed to, and any other substance is exposed to, would affect the decomposition rate of the substance. The question here is, could we expect that metal objects from more than 10,000 years ago would last until today? Carlson is making the case that it would be highly unlikely for it to survive that long.
There was an interesting series of shows a few years ago. I think it had to do with the idea of what if humans just suddenly departed? Mm-hmm. What if we took humans out of the equation? What would happen to all of the infrastructure left behind? Just under normal kind of gradualistic change that we're used to within, the last few centuries.
The show he's referring to is Life After People, which aired on the History Channel between 2008 and 2010. The show speculates about how objects would deteriorate over time if people suddenly disappeared from the world. It's important to note that the show never says that nothing would be left after 10,000 years. In fact, it leaves the question open. And the show never claims to be an authority on the matter.
The upshot of it is that 10,000 years from now, it's pretty much gone.
Is this true? Heavy metals, such as gold, silver, platinum, iron, copper, tin, and lead, are particularly durable. Archaeology, as you know, often finds artifacts below the ground, so for the sake of this discussion, let's consider how long a metal object would last underground. An in-depth study for the U.S. Department of Energy was done in 1980 on the durability of metals, and its conclusions shed some light on this matter. The study was conducted in order to determine what sorts of containers would work best in the disposal of nuclear waste material. The study notes that metal artifacts numbering in the thousands have been found all over the world, and many of these are thousands of years old. Copper beads, for example, have been found at Çatalhöyük in the Neolithic period and Boncuklu Tarla in the Mesolithic period. Testing archaeological artifacts, the researchers determined that iron artifacts on land or buried had a maximum corrosion rate of between 0.001 and 0.4 inches per 1,000 years. The modern measurement for the maximum corrosion rate of iron is 0.48 inches per thousand years. That means an absolute maximum of 4.8 inches every 10,000 years. A large iron artifact, therefore, from 10,000 years ago, would not have corroded completely away. Their study concluded that a copper or bronze artifact would, at the absolute maximum, corrode 0.1 inches per thousand years. That is 1 inch per 10,000 years. The modern measurement for the maximum corrosion rate of copper is 0.054 inches per thousand years. That indicates that an absolute maximum of 1 inch would corrode every 10,000 years. What does that mean? It means that Randall is wrongle. The study is fascinating and is available online, so I will leave a link to it below this video.
If you look at the great buildings that make up all the metropolitan areas now of the world, most of them are steel frame structures, and they're clothed in a skin that will keep the elements out maybe for a half a century.
Yes, but what about the parts of the structures that are below ground? There's quite a bit of our civilization below ground, as a matter of fact.
But without maintenance, that the Golden Gate Bridge up in San Francisco is constantly undergoing maintenance, because if you stop maintaining it, immediately it starts decaying. Immediately it starts rusting. And interesting, if you think about if humans left the planet 10,000 years from now, some interstellar anthropologists arrive, what would they see that would indicate that we had been here?
Notice how Mr. Carlson continues to focus on structures that are exposed to the elements. The whole field of archaeology is largely concerned with what has been buried, because that is where ancient remains tend to be preserved.
What do you think would still be left after 10,000 years? There's actually two things that they named in this particular program. I bet you can guess one of them.
Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore. Good guess. Yes, that's one of them. And, of course, the Great Pyramid would be the other one. And that's it. Everything else is gone.
Wow.
I don't know which episode of Life After People Mr. Carlson is referring to, but why he would emphasize the fact that only Mount Rushmore and the Great Pyramid would survive from our time, I don't know. It certainly isn't true. In my experience, most advocates of a lost advanced civilization from the Stone Age are constantly pointing at material evidence for it.
Very precise cutting. The Maya basically had no metal tools whatsoever.
They go all around the world finding all sorts of artifacts that they say demonstrate its existence, and which they date to more than 10,000 years ago. Those artifacts seem to multiply every year. Mind you, none of these are new discoveries. They just take the artifacts that other people have discovered and redate them to the time period they prefer. But they certainly seem to think there's plenty left over from this lost civilization. Now, of course, Mr. Carlson might say, well, those are all made of stone. Stone lasts. Leaving aside the fact that they are not all made of stone, it simply is not true that only stone lasts. We've already discussed metal, but what about other materials? Glass and ceramics can last for hundreds of thousands of years. Yeah, they might break, but we can still find the pieces. We have ceramics that have survived from the Upper Paleolithic, such as the Venus of Dolní Věstonice. They found pottery from Asia just as old. When buried, glass can last 1,000,000 years. A glazed piece of pottery can last 1,000,000 years. Look it up. How long do you think synthetic material like plastic can last? Well, it depends on the type, but PVC will last practically forever. Fiberglass also is resistant to decomposition. Even wood, when in the right environment, can last for tens of thousands of years. You ever hear of the Schoningen spears? They're from the Paleolithic period. Look them up. How about the Shigir idol? It's dated to the Mesolithic period. Google it. These are wood objects. How about human or animal remains? Underground, these can last a super long time as well. Bone can last over 1,000,000 years. A baby mammoth from 40,000 years ago was found, preserved almost completely intact in ice. The fibers from textiles can last for tens of thousands of years. Then, of course, we have fossils, which can preserve the remains of organic creatures going back a very, very long time. I have to ask Mr. Carlson then, Where are the remains of the metals, the ceramics, the glass, the wood, the synthetics, and the people from the time before the last great catastrophe? Archaeologists, anthropologists, and paleontologists will give you an answer. They'll tell you that the remains have been found. The problem is, they don't indicate the existence of a great lost advanced civilization. And you can no longer hide behind the bogus argument that nothing but stone would have survived.
When you now begin to factor in the thing that I've been basically working with is the idea that we have these intermittent, I call them non-linearities, discontinuities within the normal orderly progression of things, the catastrophes, if you will. Superimpose a few of those in the process, and basically 5,000, 10,000 years from now, you're not going to find much to show that we had been here.
Obviously untrue, and inventing scientific-sounding terms for your view will fool nobody but the most gullible of people, or the people that don't want to bother doing the research. Yes, there have been catastrophic events in Earth's past, and lots of things get destroyed. But everything doesn't get destroyed. The material record doesn't get erased by these disasters. It stretches all the way back through all of them. Thank you for watching this video and getting all the way to the end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and take a look at some of my other Myths of Ancient History videos. I'll catch you later. You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word, so feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.